Recording. So again, welcome to the webinar today. My name is Anu Smalley. I'm the founder of Kapala Consulting Group. Our mission at Kapala Consulting is to assist organizations and individuals to maximize their capabilities in their unique journeys in Agile and in life. I'm a certified Scrum trainer, certified enterprise coach, and I've been working in the Agile space for a long time, and I'm familiar with many of you here. Kapala Consulting, we work with a broad network of Agilists, and we work together as a community to help our clients and the Agile community provide assistance in their Agile journeys. With us today is Lucy O'Keefe, and she is going to speak on the topic of Scrum Master as a trainer. So remember the 4 competencies. Lucy's talked about the first one, which was facilitator last time. We're going to talk about the trainer this time. Lucy is a certified Scrum professional, and she is the owner of Dot Frog Consulting. She is in the midst of her own journey to become a certified Scrum trainer. Gonna mute her. She's in her own process and journey to become a certified Scrum trainer, and she's been working in the Agile space since 2012 and has been involved with Scrum teams as a developer, a product owner, a Scrum master, and now as a coach. Her career has spanned over 25 years in IT, and she has experience in software, nonprofit, and the financial industry. Lucy is extremely passionate about Scrum Master, and she really enjoys helping Scrum Masters drive change in their organization. So Lucy, thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, and she is going to tell you all about what it means to be a trainer. Just a couple more things for logistics to get you going. Our next webinar is May 13th at noon Eastern, and Lucy and I will be presenting Scrum Master as a coach, which is the 3rd competency. And Elizabeth, I have no idea how you did this, but I published my event and boom, Elizabeth is the first person to sign up for the thing. So I was telling Lucy, I'm like, dang, I didn't even get a chance to test it, and Elizabeth's in. So
I'm fan number 1.
You are indeed, you are. And we will send you links for this. We also have a bunch of other classes coming up. So all our classes and our webinars, they'll all be on Eventbrite and on our website. At Kapala Consulting, we've also discovered the need to host some communities of practice. So we host some COPs on Slack for Scrum Master, product owner, and leaders. And when we follow up for this webinar with a thank you email, we will have a link to future webinars, to Eventbrite, to all our classes, to these communities of practice, along with the recording of today's session. I will be your facilitator today, assisting Lucy. We think the presentation will be around 40 minutes, followed by a short Q&A. I'm going to make sure everybody is muted so we minimize disruptions. My hope is that we won't stop for questions, but if you have questions, drop them in the chat window. I'll be monitoring chat. So if there's some question that I feel is very pertinent in the moment, I'll bring it up. If not, we will answer all the questions during the Q&A period. All right, with that, I am going to hand the floor over to Lucy. Enjoy the session, everyone.
Thank you so much, Anu. I appreciate the introduction. And for those of you that don't know, Anu is a close friend, and she has been my mentor for 3 years now, and she's helping me on my journey to becoming hopefully at least half as great as she is as a certified Scrum trainer. So thank you everyone for being here. I see a lot of familiar faces, and I appreciate you being here today. So for those of you that were not with me 2 months ago, we started this series of webinars by speaking about the Scrum Master as facilitator. That there is a recording of that event, and maybe a new at some point, if you want to just put the link to your YouTube channel on here so that people are able to go back and watch that webinar, that would be great. But one of the reasons we started this set of webinars is because there are so many. I saw. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about the role of the Scrum Master. So, I wrote a blog about that. And after that, we were like, you know what, we should do all these webinars where we can talk about each one of the competencies that the Scrum Master has and how we can overcome all those misconceptions that are out there for the Scrum Master. So as I said, 2 months ago, we talked about the Scrum Master as facilitator. And today we'll be talking about the Scrum Master as trainer, which is one of the competencies as well. And of course, you saw that our next webinar will be about the Scrum Master as coach, and then we'll finish it off with the Scrum Master as mentor a couple of months from now. So what does it mean for a Scrum Master to wear the training hat, right? Or to have the competency of trainer? So as you can see here, when you wear your trainer hat, you are biased, right? When we talked about the facilitator last time, if you were with me, we talked about how that is an unbiased role, right? You have no skin in the game. Well, the trainer is completely different. You do have skin in the game. You are biased. Was I frozen, Anu?
Anu, we can't hear you, or I can't.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me
Yep.
now?
We can
Sorry.
hear
Yep.
you.
You were frozen just for a little bit, Lucy.
Okay. Yeah, everybody froze on my side, so I apologize.
Uh,
So wearing the trainer hat, once again, it's biased. You have skin in the game. You want people to learn what it is that you're talking about. You want people to know your experiences and learn from your experiences. What else are you as a trainer? So of course you have to have deep knowledge of the subject, right? You can't be training somebody on something that you don't know. So for me, for example, as Anu said, I'm extremely passionate about Scrum, about Agile, and especially about the Scrum Master role. If you've worked with me in the past, you know how passionate I am about that role. So for me, training others on how to be a great Scrum Master is something that comes very easily because I did it for a long period of time and I just have a lot of passion about it. So my knowledge, shines through, as yours should when you are training others in the subject. You put your own spin on things, so that goes hand in hand with the biased side of being a trainer as a Scrum Master. You can use your experiences, you can use things that you've learned, you can use things that you've done. Like for example, I feel that I've been very good at executing as a Scrum Master, so it's very easy for me to teach others how to execute as a Scrum Master and help with the Scrum team. And the other thing about being a trainer is that you're not just a trainer for your own team, right? If you remember, if you've read the Scrum Guide, the Scrum Master serves not only the team, but the Scrum Master also serves the product owner and the organization. So you can do trainings to the product owner and trainings to the organization, your leadership, your stakeholders, users, HR. There's many areas within your organization where you can become a trainer and help people understand the Scrum framework and Agile better. So with that being said, we have a few polls for you. So the first one is think about a training session you enjoyed and what made it so great. So there are 2 ways that you can submit your answer. You can join by web. You go to polev.com and then enter Luciana O'Keefe without the E at the end, 409, and you're going to respond to the activity. Or you can text Luciana O'Keefe 409 to 22333 and then text a message after that. So hopefully everyone can get on that. And I'll be able to see
Evie.
any responses. I'll give you 30 seconds or so to go ahead and do that. I'll wait until, how many people do we have on the call, on the video, on the meeting?
Around 48. So
Okay.
including you and I.
Right, okay. We have 5 responses so far. I'll wait until we have at least 30 to go ahead and show the responses and see what people are saying. And don't close out of it. If you're in the web, don't close out of it more. They're just going to pop up for you in the same screen. So there's no need to get out and go back in.
And I posted the Luciana O'Keefe 409 in the chat window if somebody wants to copy and paste.
Yes, makes it easier. Sorry. I did not choose that. It was done automatically.
So what do people say?
I'm gonna go ahead and show some of the responses that we have. So engaging, the facilitator, engaging again with the attendees versus a lecture. Yes, very important. The interactivity between the participants and the trainer, a good balance of both. Personality of the presenter, engaging. That seems to be a common theme.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone could relate to it. Speaker was engaging. Lead role in Scrum, a day in the life of SM, a day in the life of PO. Everyone being involved, breakout rooms,
Oh, nice one.
welcoming environment, dynamic trainer and engaging. Yeah, I see a common theme here in a lot of these answers. Hands-on, active participation, fun, practice. So I think a lot of the ones that are coming through talk about, you know, the trainer not being just a lecturer, right? Being engaging, there being some interactivity during the training session. So this is great. Awesome. Engaging. Great. So that's about the training session that you have enjoyed and what made it so great. The use of examples, of course, it's always good to hear what people have actually experienced in their lives and making it real for everybody else instead of just being theoretical. Right? Engaging.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So let's move on to our next poll. And this is the complete opposite, right? And this should pop up on your screen as well. So think about a training session that you hated. What made it so awful? I'll wait for a couple of responses and I'll start showing it. Reading from slides. Boring. Lecture. Boring again. Just reading the content. So the complete opposite, right, of what we said in the previous poll. So I think everyone would pretty much would rather have an engaging trainer who is interacting with everyone, with all of the attendees, instead of somebody who's just lecturing and reading from slides, boring, right, not engaging anyone. So this is great for you to bring this up in these polls, because as you become a trainer within your teams, within your organization, these are things to think about, right? How can I be less boring? How can I not be a lecturer, right? How can I engage the participants? How can I make it interactive? So these are some of the things that we want to think about as we are acting as a trainer in our Scrum Master roles, right? Disorganized, yep, exactly, reading slides. Great, yep. Thank you for sharing those. So one more last poll. And this is when you think about your favorite trainer, teacher, or instructor, what characteristic did you admire the most about them? Openness, connection, willingness, story, excitement, knowledgeable, humility, openness. A lot of the Scrum values I'm seeing here.
Mm-hmm.
Fearlessness, connection, humor. So a lot of great characteristics, right, that we're thinking about here. So once again, as you're thinking of yourself when you're becoming a trainer, how can you be more open? How can you be more passionate? How can you be more engaged, more personable, more empathetic? How can you gain more knowledge? Because for me, there's nothing worse than trying to teach a subject that I have no knowledge on. You're going to do much better if you have knowledge on the subject that you're teaching. So make sure that you really know what you're talking about. And if you don't know, it's okay, right? There's no need to pretend. If you need somebody else to step in and train your team on something, you can always ask somebody else to step into that trainer role. But thank you. I think these are awesome. Thank you so much for sharing them. So there's 5 characteristics that I want to talk about. And I think these are all characteristics that we all brought up, right? Knowledgeable, of course. That was one of the biggest ones, I think, in the word cloud that we just saw. You have to have knowledge of the subject matter that you're talking about. And when it comes to Scrum, it's very easy to gain knowledge on that. You guys are all attending this webinar. You probably attended other webinars. Some of you are certified. Some of you have attended other trainings. So make sure that you're becoming more and more knowledgeable. I got my CSM years and years and years ago, and I have never stopped learning, right? I go to at least 1 or 2 webinars a month. I make sure that I'm focused on that continuous learning and that continuous improvement. So do the same for you, because just because you went through a certification class doesn't mean that you know everything. I don't know everything. Anu doesn't know everything yet. And Anu has been doing this a lot longer than I have. But there's always something new to learn. And, for example, the Scrum Guide, it goes through revisions pretty often. It just went through a revision in November of 2020. And I still know a lot of people that are still using the terms that used to be used before, or don't really know the new things that have been added. So keep yourself informed of everything that is going on so that you are knowledgeable about everything that has to do with Scrum and agility as well. Good communicator, that's obvious. You don't want somebody teaching you something who can't communicate well. So make sure that you're focusing on your communication skills. A lot of people are introverts. You probably won't believe this, but I was an introvert. There's somebody here in the class that knew me before I got into this whole Scrum thing, and Erica. She probably knows that I was not always like this. But what are the things that you can do to become a great communicator, right? There's lots of places that you can take classes or something like that, where you can become a better communicator and a better speaker. So, make sure that you invest in that as well in order to be a good trainer. Engaging, I think we talked about that one a lot, right? It came up, I think, in every single one of the polls that we did. Make sure things aren't boring, right? Communicate with the audience. Don't talk at them. I think somebody talked about that. Don't be a lecturer. Make sure there's lots of activities going on in your training. Make sure that you're not only talking to people, but that you're hearing from people as well during your training sessions. Organized, I think somebody put that up there. It's good to be organized. You need to know what it is that you're doing when, and what are the items that you need to get a hold of in order to present things correctly. So always be organized. Time management as well, for me, would fit into that. And be passionate. That is going to shine through. I know for me, I completely change when I'm talking about Agile and Scrum, and especially about the Scrum Master role. Anu is very passionate about leadership. For example, you can completely see that, when she's talking about it. So the more passionate you are about something, the more people are going to feel that you're being authentic about what you're talking about and that you really know what you're talking about. So if you're passionate, that is a great characteristic to have as a trainer or anything else, right? But since we're talking about training today, be passionate about training others. And for me, when I see that light bulb go off in people's heads, for me, that's the greatest feeling in the world, because I'm really passionate about teaching people what I know and how great Scrum and Agile can be for a person and for an organization. So let's move on some of the most common training techniques that we have. So the first one that I have here is small group discussion. So a lot of times you sit in a training class, for example, with 30 people, and you and I just sat in one for the past 3 days. And how awful would it be if it's just 30 people all the time and there isn't a forum where you can get into smaller groups and have discussions, maybe one-on-one or, 1 and 5 people or so. So Zoom, for example, gives us a great tool for this. There's breakout rooms that we can send people into, have them participate into small group discussion, give them case studies or work situations that they can discuss, or even do teach backs, within that small group of people. It's a great way for knowledgeable people to share ideas with people who are maybe not so knowledgeable. So if you're having those small group discussions, it's always good to have, senior people who are more senior versus people who are junior together so that those conversations can flourish. Another great technique is storytelling. So Anu does a really great job of storytelling. She has a ton of great stories, and I've started to get my own. But when you tell your own stories about how something works well or doesn't work well, things that you've seen throughout your career, the experiences that you've had, and tell those to people, it makes the training more real, right? A lot of times, Anu and I are training class, and people will be like, oh, but what is it like in the real world, right? Or this doesn't happen in the real world. And Anu and I, we live in the real world. We've both worked in different companies. So we have a lot of stories to tell. I think it makes it more concrete to the people who are learning that these things really happen and that it can be successful in the real world. So it's very effective when we're debriefing questions. People ask questions and you can give your own experiences to answer those questions. So you use that storytelling. It's a really, really great tool. The next one that we have is case studies. So case studies, it's a problem-oriented way of thinking, and it's a problem-oriented way of doing training within the workplace. It's an excellent way to capitalize, especially when you're doing adult learning, right? Not so much with young kids, but especially when you're teaching Scrum or Agile, you are teaching to adults. So using case studies to show how things have worked in different organizations of what different organizations are doing is a great way for them to understand how this framework can work within their own organization. So remember to use those. Interactive lecture, I think we touched upon that during the polls as well, right? Lecturing itself is extremely boring. Especially when all they're doing is reading from a slide deck. No one wants to sit through a class like that. I know that I wouldn't want to sit through a class like that. And, and I will say that the first trainings that I've done when I first started training in Scrum and Agile, I was reading from a slide deck, and there was a lot of words in the slide deck. And now I've completely shifted, right? I still have slides, but very few words in the slide deck where you just use a lot of pictures, but make sure that you are talking about what it is that you're showing. The visuals are always great, but make sure that you're having the right conversations. You are engaging people. Inject some games into your learning or some other activities, and that's going to make it a lot more interactive with everybody that is attending your training. Mm-hmm. The other one that I want to talk about is quizzes. Of course, we've done some polls, so we know what those are. And we know what quizzes are as well. But when you have very long and complicated training, it's good to stop periodically and just quiz the attendees on what it is that they have learned. And you can do that via games as well. But that will let you know, too, if you're doing a good job training people and teaching people what it is that you're asking them to learn. And they can teach you back too, if you give them some quizzes and they have questions, or they can share their own experiences as well. So there's a lot that you can incorporate when you are doing quizzes. One other way that you can incorporate quizzes is maybe when you first start your training, do a pre-quiz, right? So maybe you ask people to read the Scrum Guide before training, and you can do a quick quiz about the Scrum Guide before you start, just to gauge where people are in their understanding, or about the Agile Manifesto, right? The values and the principles. that's always a great place to do a quiz, because that way you don't have to revisit the Agile Manifesto, for example. So there's a lot of areas where you are able to do that. Okay. We have one last poll, I promise. So what are some of the techniques that you are familiar with when it comes to training, either that you have done it yourself or that you have experienced through others?
Hmm.
Breakout sessions, quizzes, interactive word clouds. Yep. Group quiz and poll. Visual pictures or props for eye catches. Yeah, that's great. Role playing. No, I think role playing is great. When I did my CSM, and unfortunately that wasn't with Anu, one of the things that we did for the daily scrum is that we had people come up in the class. Well, had people come up in the class and play the role of the scrum master, the product owner, and what we used to call the development team, right? The developers at that time, and that worked, right? It really helps sink in. Visual competitive games. Yep. And when I do some of those,
Mhm.
creating a theme, activities, small discussion groups, fewer than 10. Yeah.
Retros.
Perspectives. Yeah, that's great. Retros are not just for the sprint, right? You can use retros for anything. And I think that that's a great technique to use during training, to gauge where people are in their learning, where they want to go, right? Word clouds. That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. So now that we've talked about characteristics that we want trainers to have and some of the techniques that we can use, one of the things that have come up in the past few years, and I know you can correct me here, but I don't know how many of you have heard of training from the back of the room. This is something that I became aware of maybe 3 or 4 years ago at most, and I don't think it's been going on much longer than that. But it is a new approach that's developed by someone called Sharon Bowen. Combines the best techniques on how to deliver a training. So this is it's a framework. They refer to it as a framework that allows learning with more impact and more use of your knowledge that you're acquiring. So what training from the back of the room does is that encourages you to discover and practice what you're learning. It leverages team learning, so not just the individual learning, and it enables self-learning as well. And everything in training from the back of the room is meant to help the learning stick, right? Because different people learn differently. So we all use our brains differently. So there's a lot of different techniques within training from the back of the room that'll help you really get that learning to stick for you, right? So, and we're going to go over a little bit some of those items, but one of the things that I want to talk about too is that in training from the back of the room, Sharon Bowen created these 6 things that she calls trumps. And these are brain-based principles that you see here. So the first one that we have here is images trumps words, right? So images, having visuals is a lot more impactful than having just words on a slide, right? So this is a lot more impactful than if I just had bullet points showing you what these trumps are. Talking trumps listening, right? So we want people to be talking to us. We're the trainers. We want them to be talking. We don't want to be the ones that are always talking and they're just listening. Movement trumps sitting. So as people move, the energy that you gain from moving also helps you absorb more of the information that you are learning or you're experiencing, because you could be moving because there is an experience that you're participating in. So that is a great way to learn. Writing trumps reading. So I don't know about you, but when I was in school and even when I take training classes, I absorb a lot more of the information if I actually write what it is that I'm either reading, watching, or listening to. And that's how I learn best. So a lot of times there's a lot of people that if they write, they'll be able to learn better than if they're just reading, right? It doesn't sink in as much. Shorter trumps longer. So every single session that you have, or any activity that you have, or any learning session within your training, you want to make that as short as possible, and not elongate that, because sometimes that can become boring as well. And the last trump that we have here is different trumps same. And that just means don't use the same activity all the time. And I think this applies to retrospectives as well. Anu and I were just talking about that earlier today in a training. If you use the same retrospective activity day in and day out, or sprint in and sprint out, right, it gets boring. The conversations become stale, and you don't get a lot from the attendees. So try something different. For each one of the learning objectives that you have within your training, do a different type of activity. And we're going to talk about activities in a little bit here as well. So when you're designing your training, if you're creating your own training, keep these 6 things in mind. How can I make sure that I'm using images, that the attendees are talking, that people are moving and not just sitting throughout the whole time, that people have the ability to write if that's something that helps them learn. How can I make my ideas, shorter, the sessions shorter, and how can I do things differently each time? So these are the things that we want to keep in mind. So training at the back of the room, there's something that we call the 4 C's in training at the back of the room. And these are the things to think about every time you're designing a piece of your learning objectives in order to teach. So the first C here is about connections. So in here it says learners actively make connections with what they already know about the topic. So there is a desire to learn, right? There's a desire to connect meaningful ways of learning to the physical environment, everything that's around it. That's something that's innate within our human brain, right? So making those connections. So personally for you, this means that you want to learn, but you want to learn differently each time. You want to connect your experiences to the learning, and you want to do something that's meaningful to you. So when you're the learner, that's where that comes into play. But at the same time, when you're teaching others, you want to make sure that you're encouraging learners to create meaningful connections of their own. And they can do that by discussing what they already know about the topic, what it is that they want to learn, and how they can connect with other learners in meaningful ways. So that's the first C, it's the connections, right? And then we're going to see a little more about how we put this into play when we're actually creating those trainings. The second concept here is the second C is concepts, and it says learners take in new information. Instructor delivers content in brief segments. So that shorter rather than prompts longer really comes into play here. So as your brain is immersing itself into learning, it gathers information in all different sorts of ways, right? Watching, listening, doing, trial and error, and then over time it creates a mental and physical pattern that translates into cognition, emotion, and physical action, and those help you learn. So that's for you as a learner. And the same applies when you are teaching to others, right? So you have learners taking new information in many multisensory ways: listening, seeing, talking, writing. So we talked about talking trumps listening, writing trumps reading, right? So all those things, drawing, reflecting, asking and answering questions. So how are you doing that to make sure that people learn? The third concept is concrete practice. So learners practice a skill or perform a task using the training content. So this goes hand in hand with the concepts that we've talked before, as well as the connections, right? So how can you practice in a concrete way? Is it by doing a simulation, right? Is it by them creating materials themselves to teach back to you? What is that practice that we're putting into play here so that they can learn better by experiencing, right? And the last one here is conclusions. The learners summarize and evaluate what they have learned. So throughout the whole learning process, the brain is going to assess what it has learned and how it can use new learnings in its own life. So this means that for you, you'd be doing some self-reflection during this step. evaluating what you learn, how you can use it, how it can change your life, if anything, and how you feel about the whole learning experience. And you can use that, for the attendees in your training class. They'll be having the same experience as well, and they'll be coming to the same conclusions by thinking of the same things, right? The self-reflection, action planning, celebration, if that's what's important at that time. So now that we've heard about training back of the room and the 4 C's, I'm going to give you a concrete example. And this is something that it's going to make it so easy for you to create your own trainings when you get to that point. So we have what we call the 4 C's map, which is an instructional design canvas. And what you would do here is first you would put in here the topic that you want to teach. So in this example here, we are going to teach about the daily scrum. Who is our audience? So in this case, we are teaching daily scrum to business stakeholders. So when it comes to the C1, the first C, connections, and before that, we need to set how much time the whole training is going to be. And I put in here, it's going to take 60 minutes. Then we are going to figure out what are we going to do about connections. So for connections, we are going to create a shout out, for example, and ask the business stakeholders, what do you know about Scrum, about the daily Scrum? And we're going to set that time box, if you will, for 5 minutes. And what we are going to get from this is that the business stakeholders are going to speak and they are going to listen during this time. So those are the actions that are going to be taking place. Remember, we talked about many different types of actions: listening, speaking, writing, moving, and drawing, right? So these are the 2 things that are going to happen during this C1 connections. Then we're going to move on to concepts, the second C. Teach. That's where you are teaching the concepts to the people who are attending your training. So what is the daily Scrum purpose? How long is it? When does it happen? Who attends? Different things that you can be teaching about the daily Scrum as an event. So in this case, when it comes to the actions, really what's happening is that in the 10 minutes that we set this for, those business stakeholders are going to speak, they're going to listen, and they are going to write. So that's how they are going to be learning. Then we come to the third C, which is the concrete practice. And in here, we want the business stakeholders to do a daily Scrum simulation. And they are going to do that for 40 minutes. And during that time, they are going to move, speak, draw, listen, and write. Because that's how we are setting up that concrete practice to take place. And then we move on to the conclusion, which is, what were your ahas about your role in the daily Scrum? And hopefully they'll say, I don't really have a role in the daily Scrum. Stakeholders don't. But they will come to that conclusion themselves. We are going to do that for about 5 minutes. And during that time, they are going to speak, listen, and write. So you can see that there's these 4 quadrants that we're always working with when we're doing training from the back of the room. But this is really something that you can use, and you're going to go off of this and build your material. So once you have this in place, then you can go ahead and, if you're using Miro, you can create your Miro boards. If you're using PowerPoint slides or Google Slides, you can go ahead and create your slides from this, and it's going to help you verify that the content that you're putting together goes back to what you had planned and what your objectives were for that training. So that's your training from the back of the room.
And I can add just one thing in here. Every single class I have ever taught, the content that we create is done using this. We first create this outline, and then we say, all right, so how do we want to use this? Are we going to do slides? Are we going to do a mural? So if you can do this, then whether it's in person or virtual is a choice you get to make. If it's in person, I'm going to give you a bunch of sticky notes and I'm going to do a simulation in person. If you're virtual, then I'm going to put you into a breakout room. If I'm teaching if you're in person, I'm going to draw and use sticky notes. If I'm virtual, I might use slides or I might go to mural. This creates the foundation. Once you have this, then how you actually present the material, doesn't really matter that much, right? It's you've got the foundation done, then it's easier. If you start thinking, oh my God, how am I going to teach daily Scrum virtually? You're stuck. First, figure out what is it you want to teach, and then apply in-person or virtual context to it. So that answered the question that we had there. Did that answer your question, Aiden? Think it did? Yep.
Thanks.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anu, for adding that. Anu has a lot more experience than I do doing training from the back of the room, so I appreciate her jumping in and giving us a little more information on that. So this is not a poll. We're just going to type this in into to the chat box right now. So what are some of the things you do to make your training more engaging? If you've done training, what are the things that you have used or infused into your training?
Mm-hmm.
Snap. Awesome, Kathy.
Yeah.
In person, always important.
Yeah. Some great ideas here, right?
Yep.
Have more than one speaker, particularly virtually. Have two people on because Zoom can do
It's
crazy
tough.
things to your brain, right?
Yeah.
Snacks. Yes,
Lunch
Kathy.
break.
Memes, icebreakers, Legos. Yeah, when in person, I used to use a lot of Legos. It's
Yeah.
kind of
Oh,
hard
yeah.
to ship Legos to everyone, right? Kahoots.
It makes
Kahoots
it
is
a little hard.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yep. Stories.
Videos.
Very important. Yep. Stress balls. That's a good one, Shelley.
Yeah. Turn on video. Have a backup plan. Absolutely.
Mhm. Real life examples.
Yeah. Tell them the story.
And you're going to have to share your virtual Lego session. Once you get that done, I think we'd all
Oh, yeah.
ask questions, real life examples. Erica, yep.
And here's a quick tip on virtual training, right? If you have in virtual environments, when
That's awesome.
your attendees are coming in with kids and dogs and cats, acknowledge them. Acknowledge the visitor in the room,
Yep.
right? Use animation in PowerPoint. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Very important. And I just did that. Yay me. I'm just kidding. No, and that's great. Yeah, and I love to see some of the responses. So there's some people that I've worked with or I'm working with now that have shared a few things that they did. And I was teaching Scrum Foundations on Monday, and Kathy was in my class. And we did a virtual battleship. And that she just used that. And that was a great tool, I think, during the class. So that's awesome.
Yes, Miro, Mural, Jamboards, whatever you can do there. And Mark, that point you put up there is absolutely critical, right? Studies have shown that the group of people that come together, if you can get them all to talk to each other within the first 10 minutes, the engagement will be higher.
Oh yeah, exactly. So very important to do those icebreakers right in the beginning as well. Great.
All right.
So let's talk about some ways that we can make it more engaging. And of course, a lot of these have come up already in the chat, right? But when you all joined during our session today, we had Justin Timberlake going on in the background, and you and I were kind of dancing in our seats, and some of one started dancing in your seats. And it just makes it lighter, right? For some reason, and more fun from the beginning. So, some music is a great way to make the sessions more engaging and get the energy up right away when you start your training sessions, or during the breaks, so that when people come back, the energy is still up in the room. So that's great. The next one that I have here is segue questions or activities. So these are great icebreakers after each break or in the beginning, like we talked about. It gets you re-engaged after a break, because a lot of times people will go get food or something, especially when it's virtual, right? And the energy can go way down. So let's make sure that we get them re-engaged by having these segue questions. Anu's daughter has done a great job doing segues in our training sessions, and it can be either, a question, what place would be your bucket list to go to, or bring back a funky hat. And everyone can talk about those items. And it's not only a way to get people re-engaged, but it's also a great way to have people get to know each other better, especially in training sessions that people don't usually work together. I think that it's awesome to do that. Animations on slides. I think we all know what that does. It changes your boring slides into something, a lot more exciting. It's great to see that movement on the slides themselves as well. Miro, any other collaboration tools. This is such a great thing to have, right? Especially where we are right now, working from home for the past year plus, that we are able to get into these tools and collaborate with each other, whether it's in a small group or a larger group, to be able to go in there and either do games or activities together and have those conversations, and just to see those sticky notes move everywhere. It gives you that idea that people are actually moving and collaborating and doing something together, which is awesome. And the last thing that I have here is games. And for me, games are a great way to learn while having fun. I'll be sharing a few of the games. That's going to be the last slide that we have for this presentation, but that is something that I've always liked to incorporate in my trainings for the past many years. I'm not going to age myself here. So what games, can we incorporate? So these are just some of the ideas, right? So you have a matching game, which is an easy one. Anu uses that. I've used that in my trainings as well. So it's a great way to get people engaged and use those in your mural boards or Miro boards or any other collaboration tool. It's awesome. Bingo, so Agile Bingo, it's something that Anu has used and I participated in it. So it's really fun to do Agile Bingo, and you can choose what topic it is that you want Agile Bingo to be on. But it's, it's fun, and being a winner is not a bad thing. It gets people excited. A gallery walk, for those of you that don't know what a gallery walk is you get different groups to do different things. So for example, if you're talking about your Scrum events, you could do a gallery walk with 5 teams. Each team focuses on one event, and then everyone can kind of go around and see what it is that the teams came up with, which is a great way to teach back as well. You have fill in the blanks. We know what that is. And factor craft, that has always been my favorite. So the first trainings that I had, I always used factor craft when talking about what used to be called Scrum roles, Scrum team roles in the back. And there was always a lot of laughter, in the class when we did that. So that's something that's really great to incorporate. And once again, you can choose the topic that you want to do factor craft on, but I've always had a lot of fun with that. So with that being said, thank you so much for your time today. I hope you enjoyed this session. It went by really, really quickly.
Yeah. So I want to actually point out something. So the polls that Lucy did, those were your C1s. The teaching that she did were your C2s. When she started getting you to talk about, so what have you done? Let's bring this all together. How do you use this in your own world? That was a C3. A pseudo C3, given this is a webinar, but it's a C3, right? And for the C4s, we're going to get into C4s in just 2 seconds. So before we get into C4s, just a reminder, upcoming webinar, you'll get a link. Upcoming classes, you'll get links. Slack groups, you'll get links. All right. C4. What aha did you get when you heard this webinar? What are you taking away? That's a C4. So if you wouldn't mind, type
Can
it
we
into
talk?
the chat. You can, what was that, Tammy?
I said, can I talk?
Yes, you can talk.
Instead of trying to make sure I spell everything correctly.
You
So
can
I guess
talk.
one of the big takeaways when I saw
Yeah.
Anu and Lucy, I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I been missing? So that was one. The second one was like, oh my gosh, you guys have more community of practices. I got to look that up.
Yep.
And then of course the other classes. So that was my quite a few ahas.
Awesome. Thank you, Tammy. How about others? Either speak up or stick it in the chat window. I need to connect with the audience at the beginning of training. Yes. Kathy took some notes. What other ahas did you get?
Learned a little bit about training from the back.
Training from the back of the room. Yes.
And in the chat we have, I haven't used music in a long time. I will next time. Yep. Makes it-
Yes, music is great.
Yep.
Reminder, yep, a quick reminder and training to the back of the room. And if you like what if you join the Slack groups and you want a quick reminder on that, just let me know. Right. The template that I have, the C4 template that we used, that was actually from another trainer. And that's common licensing. What is it called? I forget, but you're all it's open
Yeah.
for everybody to use it. So I'll drop that in the thank you email as well. Right. And as some of you have been saying, don't do this alone. It's always better to do it with somebody. It's always better to co-lead rather than trying to do this by yourself.
And it's more fun for sure.
Yeah, it is more fun for sure. All right. So we have a couple more minutes. I have a question for you, and I asked this last time as well. What would you like us to do webinars on? What topics do you have in mind? Chat window is best for this. I'm going to keep track of these topics. So next webinar is Scrum Master as Coach. We're going to dabble a little pinky finger into the coaching world. And if you want more coaching stuff, we can get into that as well. So give me some topics. And as you type in topics, if you have any questions, ask away. Any questions for Lucy? Scrum, say a bit more, Kirsten. SM versus PM.
Project
that-
manager.
Project manager? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, sorry, it took me a hot minute to get off this mute. Yeah, so it's this idea that in some organizations like mine, our Scrum Masters are new and they're still trying to work their way out of a traditional project manager type role.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
specifically in new, like how do they help their teams not be so reliant on them for that?
Got it. So we have that topic. We have Scrum Master as servant leader. Good future ideas, helping the team that is not 100% Scrum, but does their own thing and calling it Scrum. Yep.
Erica, I can work with you on that.
Julie, question, how to incorporate movement in classes. Breakout rooms is a great option because movement is not just physical movement. Movement can also be your location movement. So don't just have them sit here and listen to you. Have them do stuff. That's movement as well.
Yeah. And go big group into a breakout room, that's considered a movement as well, right?
Even a scavenger hunt too.
Scavenger hunt.
Just like 3 items. It doesn't have to be a lot. We did one with
Yeah.
3 and it was
Cool.
great for the team.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good idea.
Absolutely. How did you find a game? Ronaldo, I'm not sure I understand your question.
My question, and I apologize if I wrote it poorly, was how did you find the list of games other than doing a common internet search?
Practice and failures and listening to other trainers and
Right.
going to sessions like this and asking Lucy, hey, Lucy, what do you do? Just sharing.
Right. A lot of the games that I know of, it's because of trainings that I have attended and they've used those games. But internet search is great too. I think Tasty Cupcakes, for example, it's a
Yep.
place you can go, and a lot of it is supposed to be in person, but you can find the virtual versions of those games as well. So that is a great place to go if you
Yep.
want to look at games and innovation games as well. Is really great.
Yep.
Thank you. And I still have those cups, those beer cups that are new made.
Oh my God. Oh, from building the pyramid. Oh my God.
Yes, from building the pyramid with the rubber bands, I think. it is.
Yes. Oh, wow. Mark, what's up? Where'd you go?
Yeah, so this is related to this presentation. I only got to catch the second half, but it was good. But on the topic of fun, so Lucy, it's been a couple months. I asked you a question about what if the team doesn't like to have fun? And you asked a very good question back to me as to, well, what does the team consider fun? It might not be the same thing that you think is fun.
Exactly.
So as an update to that, I asked the team and they were very direct. We don't like to have fun.
What?
We just want to get down to business, and we're the type of people that we just like to work. We don't like to have fun. So I thought that was interesting. I thought I'd just pass that
Yikes.
along to you.
So my
That's
next
not what
question.
you wanted to hear.
My next question to them would be, so if I'm trying to help you learn a topic, how would you like me to teach you? Because they may say, we like to do a simulation, so their word fun may be different meaning than what we can. I consider music and dancing fun. Somebody else may say, give me a quiz and that's fun. And I'm going, oh dear God, don't give me quizzes. Right? So ask them, how do you like to learn? That may give you insights into what they might enjoy.
Yep.
So lots of questions here. Yep. Join the Scrum Master community. One of the things we want to try and do, and I think we'll probably do this in May, is just do like an open office hours where people can come in and hang out and ask us a question. Ronaldo, so if you're wondering, what kind of game do I do here? Come join us, ask questions in the Slack community. We are happy to help with that. Right, so there, I'm going to copy down the chat file and keep track of the topics, and then we'll take a look at these topics for June onwards topics. There are a bunch of great topics in here. So thank you for being here.
Thanks,
You're on.
everybody.
Yep, thank you very much.
Thank
We'll send out the link soon.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.